All right, I'm going to talk with you about the alignments that we looked through, and I'll start by talking about the federally recommended plan. I think most people are familiar with it, but I'll go through it. It has the main levee in this area here. We've got storage area 1, comes up through here, and there were control structures on the Wild Rice, the Red River, and Wolverton Creek. When they went through the value engineering study last fall, which, as Brett said, is part of the normal core process, value engineering proposal 13 recommended moving this alignment north such that you eliminate the structure on the Wolverton Creek and gain enough storage volume in this area here to eliminate storage area 1 and all this structure that would be involved, getting the same results for the project but at a lower cost. So 2 alignments were selected for further study this spring along value engineering 13 to meet the requirements of value engineering proposal 13. We came up with A and C. Both these alignments meet that by eliminating this Wolverton Creek structure as well as storage area 1. The local sponsors also requested that south of Oxbow alignment get looked at, as well as another option for essentially saving Oxbow, which would lower the elevation in the staging area such that it could be protected with a ring dike. So we looked at alignments further north and further north until the impacts were less than 3 feet, which is the allowable for ring diking Oxbow, and came up with an alignment that was north of the Wild Rice, came back, tied in here. That also eliminates the structure on the Wild Rice River. You would only have 1 control structure on the Red River. So those were the 4 that we looked at. The 2 south of Oxbow and north of Wild Rice, in one form or another, were looked at during feasibility and screened out. So those are not part of the core process because they were looked at during feasibility, screened out. Local sponsors requested that they be studied in more detail. So along with the federally recommended plan, these 4 options were what were looked at in more detail. In addition, we looked at north of the Wild Rice, both with and without ring diking Oxbow, but really we'll show you some of those results, but practically we wouldn't do north of the Wild Rice without a protection of Oxbow. So in looking at that, there's a number of different, a lot of data you have to look through. So what we used is what's called a decision science process. Don't want the word science to fool you in that it's, it's going to be very precise and give you the answer. What it does is it has a process to organize a lot of information, allow you to rank things, and then allow a decision to be made from that ranking. Really just helps you organize your data and your thought process when you're dealing with large, complex amounts of data. We came up with 7 criteria that I'll show you in a moment. Go through those. We also considered cost, both construction as well as lands and damages. The implementation scoring was based on the local consultant team, our group as a program management consultant, along with the Corps' input. So it was a broad team that did the scoring. We came up with a base case scoring that you'll see tonight. We also did some sensitivity or what if scenarios, and that can continue to be done to see how the rankings would change if you change some of the scoring or some of the implementation weighting. The criteria we looked at, the top 2 were risk and implementability. The risk is really, we're trying to reduce the risk of failure of a project, make sure that the project that we have is the most robust that can be built. So things that increase the risk of a project are things like the length and height of embankment. The longer embankment you have or the higher it is, the higher a risk of failure. Difference in the head or the water on one side versus the water on the other side increases that. Number of structures, more structures you have, the more complex it is. Resilience to a variety of flood events. So things like the gated structures that Brett talked about that allow response to a number of different types of floods is going to be more resilient. Implementability, we want a project that we can implement. So compliance with the permits we already have, like the record of decision and chief's report, is important. There's also future permitting requirements. The permitting on this project isn't done, so we want a project that can be permitted so that it can be constructed. We've also got hydraulic and physical issues. As you move the location of the diversion around to physically get the water hydraulically into the channel so that it flows around is also very important. We also looked at the number of structures impacted by each alignment option. Environmental concerns, wetland impacts, river miles impacted, number of acres impacted, floodplain impacts. All these were in reducing order of weight as we looked at each one of these factors, so we didn't weigh them all exactly the same. One of the key ones that seems to have the most interest is the number of structures that are impacted by each alignment. And so we've got across the top federally recommended plan, VE 13A, C, north of the wild rice, and then north of the wild rice with the Oxbow levee, and then south of Oxbow are the, so it pretty much goes federally recommended plan and then moving the alignment north and then eventually south of Oxbow. One of the things I'd like you to notice on this is for the alignments of the federally recommended plan, VE 13A and C, and then the north of the wild rice with the Oxbow levee, all have between total structures, residential and non-residential, between about 700 and 750 structures impacted. There's not a lot of variation in the total number of structures regardless of which alignments those are. When you look at the total residential, they tend to range between about 320 and 340 residential structures, again, regardless of the 4 alignments. Way that's working out is as we move further north with that alignment, we're impacting new structures, but at the same time, we're no longer impacting some of the structures that are further south. So it's just changing the location of the structures impacted, but not really changing the gross number of those that are being impacted. Cost savings, when we looked at the cost, and these costs, just to back up to want a point of clarifications because you'll see some different numbers later on. During this only considers the alignment of options. It's not combined with either the increased flows through town or the gates on the diversion. That would change these numbers slightly, but should not change the relative order of magnitude as far as how they change as you move north, but they are strictly for the alignment changes. The costs here are for the combined alignments, the gates on the diversion inlet, and the increased flows through town with the in-town levees. So compared to the federally recommended plan, we have VE 13A saves the greatest amount of money, approximately $50 million. VE 13C saves about $40 million. North of Wild Rice plus the Oxbow levee saves about $6 million, just a little bit better than the federally recommended plan. And then south of Oxbow actually adds about $30 million to the project. So in putting all this information together, these various bands with their colors are the different criteria we had times the scoring. So on risk, with the federally recommended plan had longer levee lengths than either VE 13A or C because we eliminated that storage area 1. So the low score on this chart wins. So both these have a lower risk profile than the federally recommended plan. Similarly, you'll see some changes in implementability between some of these alternatives. The ones inside the box here are the ones that the Corps are within the Corps process. their federally recommended plan plus their 2 VE options. The ones outside the box were the ones that were additionally looked at based on the local sponsor's request. When we score these technically, these score almost identical from a technical scoring standpoint, but since VE13A was lower in cost, had more savings, it is ranked higher than VE13C. The next, still better than the federally recommended plan as far as technical, would be the north, excuse me, north of the wild rice plus oxbow levy, then the federally recommended plan. Two that were scored as we did higher, which was worse than the federally recommended plan, was just north of the wild rice without oxbow levy, and then south of oxbow. So from the technical team's perspective, we're recommending eliminating further consideration of both of those options in looking at recommending these in this order. Again, this is a technical team recommendation, as Daryl and Aaron stated at the beginning. Now it's time for the public input. The actual decision will be made on the board in October, so I don't want to imply that this is a decision made. It's really just technical ranking from the team.